Okay, tonight we have a topic that I hope, well, how do I say this? Often when you present something, people say, well, that's interesting, but will it scale? Will it scale up? You know, it's like, well, that's great, but how can we build on that? The topic I have tonight is big. And the question is, can we scale it down? Can we scale it down to the needs of a small group, a small organization? Because the material that I'm going to be presenting is stuff that I was trained in, things that I lived with and worked with for many, many years in the corporate world. And it works for what was up until today the largest company in the world, Microsoft. But they just got surpassed by NVIDIA. And so obviously they're not following this stuff like they did when I was with them. We want to talk about decision-making and successful team leadership. Decision-making is so important in leadership that you can't really even discuss leadership without the concept of decision-making. And decision-making is a leader who understands the system. And I've got a graphic here, and there's a lot of stuff going on here, but the system, and we talked about the system in one of my previous episodes, and the system can be very complicated. It can have a lot of moving parts. It consists of a lot of different things, and they all work together to make something happen. And a leader has to understand that system well enough to make decisions about that system. A leader who understands the system and communicates a compelling vision, he has to be able to know it and share it with a lot of different people, a lot of different levels for a lot of different purposes, while able to make tough decisions in dynamic environments. I know I put together a mouthful there. And so I'm going to just take away some of that. Understands the system, communicates a compelling vision, and makes tough decisions. That is absolutely vital for successful team leadership. What I've got here, I tried to make it as small and as insignificant as possible. And it's down here, and it's called an idea. It's a seed. It's somebody's got a thought. We all get them. Every now and then I'll tell my wife, honey, don't talk to me. I'm having a thought. Don't disturb me. I might be a good thought. It might be something that could grow into something bigger. And that's exactly what we hope our good thoughts will do. And we nurture them. We ruminate on them. We think about them, and we analyze them. And eventually, that little idea starts to take a shape of its own. And it's like, that's when we start to tell our wife, I've got a really interesting thought. And I'm doing some deep analysis on it. And as we analyze that thought, then we start to silo into three areas, which will always happen. The first silo is scope. How big is this idea of mine? The second thing that we're going to have to consider is, what's the cost? How much is this going to cost? And, you know, if you really get putting the cart before the horse, you'll say, how much can I make out of this? Right. You better count the cost before you start counting your eggs and chickens. My mother used to always say, don't count your chickens till they're hatched. Yeah. And then the third thing has to do with the schedule. What's the time frame? When do you think you're going to be able to do this? Well, you know, the way I'm thinking, it could take about a year or two, but I think I could have it ready in a month. Slow down, slow down. Take the time to seriously consider these three areas of your idea that is turned into possibly something that you want to do, make. Yeah. And as you're doing that, you start thinking, okay, I want it to be perfect. I'd like to do it fast, And I've already convinced my wife I can get this done on the cheap. And so these are the three areas that we start to consider. And these three form a perfect triangle. And I'm not making this up. This is real. In quality assurance, this is called, in Six Sigma, which is a process, this is called a value triangle. The value triangle is where we start to determine where we're going to put our care, where we're going to focus our sense of urgency. And if we say we want it perfect, project management, which I was in quality assurance, I was also in project management, they call it the iron triangle. This is an iron triangle. You're going to live with this. There's no flexibility here. It's going to do certain things as you try to manipulate it. And PMI, which is something that I was trained in, it's Project Management Institute. They call it the triple constraint. And this is in every project, every system, everything that we do.
These are the literal terms that are used.
Absolutely. Perfect, fast, and cheap. Now they may, come up with something a little different, but absolutely, absolutely. Choose two. You can have two of those. You can't have all three. You go into the store and you say, I want something made, I want something produced for me, I'll pick it up tomorrow. And they say, you want it fast? Yes, I got to have it fast. Okay, do you want us to do a quick and dirty on it? Or does it have to be perfect? Well, it's got to be perfect. It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be cheap. Or you say, well, I'm in no hurry. Well, then we can take our time. We can do it perfect. And we can do it cheap. But you'll get it next week. You can't have all of them. It's story time, guys. I want to talk to you about perfect. When I started my career at Microsoft, I was in the quality assurance group. And I worked my way up the food chain to where I was managing within quality assurance for the internal IT department. And I would go to meetings with people who cared about the product that we were producing, cared about the schedule. There were people there from the finance department, and we would be discussing how the project is progressing. And there were those talking about the money. There were those talking about the schedule. There were those talking about the needs in the field. And I was there to champion quality. My job was to battle the budget, wrestle with the budget, and not let quality suffer. I stood up for quality. And I didn't care when it was delivered. It didn't matter to me if they got it next month, next year. I don't care who was crying for it. My job, we're gonna give them the best. And because I did a good job, they eventually promoted me to where I became a project manager over the entire process. I had managers working for me. And I had one woman that I had trained, that she had come up through the ranks, and she was a manager of a project that I was over. And I came into her office one day and I told her, we're going to ship this in a couple days. She says, it's not perfect. And I said, it doesn't need to be perfect. She said, you are of the devil. She couldn't believe how I had changed my colors. She says, you always stood up for quality. And I told her, I said, that's not my job anymore. That's your job. Now you fight me. It's your job to fight me. My job is to get all three of those in balance. I'm the project manager. I am no longer the quality manager. I don't manage the budget. I don't manage the schedule. I've got to see that all three of them get in there. And so I told her, you're going to have to learn to prioritize. You're going to have to learn to discover what is the severity of a default. And if it's not that severe and it's not that important, we'll ship it. We just don't care. That's the iron triangle. We're talking about decision making here. We're talking about decision making. So what we've got here is what I've shown you, whether it's your idea or you work for somebody else and it's their idea and they've gone through the process. At some point, there's a certain amount of churn that starts to take place. That churn is where you go through all, and when I'm working on a project at home, and I still like to do projects, and I start to churn like this, and I talk to my wife, and I talk to different people, and I call people up, and I ask for bids, and I talk about estimates, and I start looking at different pieces. It drives my wife nuts. She says, "What are you doing?" And I says, I'm putting all this together because all the pieces, I got to see what the pieces are. Well, when are you going to do it? Well, I'm just playing with the puzzle right now. I'm not worried about the picture. I just need to see what's in the puzzle. And eventually, I'm going to get what's called a project plan creation. Now I know what it's going to feel like, look like, do, what it's going to cost, what the time frame could be. Believe it or not, back in the early days of Microsoft, we would put this stuff on Post-it notes. We would have a big whiteboard and a stack of Post-it notes. And different ones would write things on the Post-it note and stick it on the wall. They'd write different pieces of the thing and they'd stick it on the wall. And the project manager would take those pieces and try to line them up. Now I'm sure this is all done electronically, but you gotta write it down, you gotta visualize it, you gotta look at it. I got a little project I'm working on right now. I call it the trip to Minnesota. I want to go back to Minnesota and just see the old country. And I want to be with some friends. And I've been discussing this with my wife, and there's a lot of discussion around this whole thing. We've looked at, do we drive or do we fly? I've thought about, well, we could drive. I've got a nice car. And then it's like, I don't know that I want to drive that car. You know, I don't want to put that kind of miles on it. So I'll rent the car. I'll just rent the car here and I'll drive it around there and then I'll drive it back. I've driven from Minnesota many times. That's a long, long drive. And then start looking at flying. But if I fly, now I'm really limited. I'm not going to be able to see Montana. I'm not going to be able to go to Coeur d'Alene. We're not going to be going to the Black Hills. I'm not going to shoot down to St. Louis. None of that's going to happen. But it looks a lot easier. And it's easier on the schedule, maybe even easier on the budget. And I've tried to color coordinate this. So just notice, that's yellow. That's yellow. Okay, I'm trying to help us here. So now we're looking at the scope. Well, we've already decided we want to go to Minneapolis, Grand Rapids, and Duluth, where I was born. So that's the scope. And anything else, if we've got time, well, yeah, we'll throw that in there. And now the green is the cost. What's this going to cost? Well, we got to get tickets, we got hotels, we got food, we got car rental. My wife's always like, is this going to cost $1 million? And I can always tell her, it's under $1 million. It's under $1 million. And then she's with me. Once this is all put together, it's if you were in the business world, it's a prospectus. Okay? This is the sort of thing you can take to the bank. You go to the bank and you want to get some money because you've got a great idea and you need some financing. They're going to say, do you have a business plan? This is what they're talking about. This is that business plan. Now I've shrunk all of what I've said down into this little corner. Now it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We have a plan, and we're going to do something with that plan. We're going to execute it. We have made a lot of decisions to get to this point. A lot of trimming, a lot of expanding, a lot of changing, a lot of calculating, a lot of looking at schedules. And now we've got to the point where that plan, if we can follow it, will work to perfection. Nothing can go wrong. How could I fail? I've thought it out. And I have such great wisdom that obviously this is going to work. And so we're ready to execute. And there's going to be decision points. So we're talking about making decisions. As we start to execute the plan based upon schedule, cost, and scope, we're going to encounter decision points. A scope decision comes up. Well, now that we've been working on this for a couple of weeks, we realize that it's a great idea, but it's not going to work standalone. We're going to need some things to go with it. Suddenly the scope gets a little bit bigger and we're off track. But that's okay because we have a plan and it's just a small little thing. And we made the right decision and we continue on, and now we sit down and look at the cash flow. And it's like, well, at this point I figured we would be like $20,000 into this. And we just spent $35,000. How does that look for the rest? Well, it doesn't look good at all. Well, we are going south here. We're starting to head south, and I thought I had a perfect plan. Well, I got estimates, but estimates are guesstimates. And now we have another decision point. It has to do with the schedule. Well, we are going to have it done by spring. We're going to market this thing by spring. We're going to execute and be finished with this by spring. Well, the schedule just got pulled completely out of whack. And our decision points, and understand this is just over these 3 points, this is just to keep it simple. This could be happening to you every day in every way. And your plan is getting tossed like a boat in a storm. And a manager or a leader that has to make decisions and get to the other shore, he's got to know what he's doing. Or otherwise, it's out of control. At some point, it's just totally out of control. And that's the value of your plan. Because your plan was made while you were not yet insane. You were in your right mind, you knew what you were doing, you thought it through, you made the right decisions, you talked to the right people, you did good analysis, and don't throw that away. What is the plan? Well, it's in many ways something you can go back and look at and measure against. I got a note here. The project color darkens as you invest more time, resources, and funds into it. As you progress, your chance of quitting, giving up, become more expensive in every way. Even your ego suffers. And it's like, man, I'm in this deep. What are you going to do? Go deeper. Okay, well, that's a decision. You're not going to quit. But fortunately, you have a plan. Note, your planning and decisions to this point serve as a tape measure to gauge against the actual scope and time and schedule. So that plan that you made, and if you didn't make a plan, now you're out there blindfolded. You have no idea, no direction. You have no map, you have no chart, you don't know anything. All you're doing is doing. You're lost. Have you ever lost in the woods? I know the feeling back in Minnesota, hunting in the woods, starting to get dark, walking along, realizing all these trees look the same and I'm alone and it's dark and I don't know which direction is north. It's a very strange feeling. It's a very strange feeling. But if you have something to measure against, and that's what your plan is for, without a plan, you're a man with very little hope. And so as your scope, cost, and schedule starts to get out of whack, you still have a true north. And you know how you can pull it back together one way or another, remembering the iron triangle. What are you willing to give up? Schedule, scope, or money? It's going to cost you something. You're going to live with the iron triangle, and you're going to have to get this thing, manage it, wrestle with it, back in line. And you're going to make decisions. 4 key attributes for making effective decisions. Strategic thinking. Now this is where now we've taken us to this point. This is where the decision-making process really is important. You got to think strategically. You got to balance short-term needs with long-term goals. What was that long-term goal? Oh, a finished product. Okay, that's what I'm aiming for, but I've got all sorts of short-term needs that come my way that have to be met. Risk assessment, identifying potential consequences and making calculated moves. You've got to identify what could go wrong rather than recognizing what is going wrong. And we're going to go into detail on these. You've got to develop resilience and adaptability. You've got to be strong but flexible. Leading effectively through uncertainty or failure. I was a hiring manager at Microsoft, hired a lot of people into the company. And one of the key things that I was instructed to interview on is how do they deal with ambiguity? What do you do when you have no clear direction? How do you deal with that? And it's interesting how people, when you ask them, give me an example of where you had to deal with ambiguity and successfully maneuver it. I don't know what you're talking about. You're dealing with it right now. This question is ambiguous. And ultimately, you're going to have a culture of continuous learning. Both leaders and their teams are open to evolving perspectives and solutions. People who say, well, I'm hard and fast and I'm not going to change. Sorry, you're going to hurt. You're going to hurt really, really bad. And so these are 4 key attributes for effective decision-making. I've got what I made is called a playbook for project success. And this portion of the playbook deals with choices. And again, I've color coordinated all of this to help us to stay focused on what I'm talking about. You're going to have to make decisions concerning cost, scope, and quality. And choices. The first we talked about was risk assessment, identifying potential consequences and making calculated moves. Elon Musk has been in the news, and so I picked him, and he recently just blew up his whole launching pad. He just blasted the thing to smithereens. Elon Musk's successful failure philosophy, proven by SpaceX rocket explosion. He says failure is success. A lot of people can't comprehend that, but he has learned to deal with risk and ambiguity and learn from it, whereas many people, risk and failure is terrifying. They feel like failure is the end. No, no, no. Failure is something you don't have to go down again. And so in the industry where people use these tools, they have this particular matrix, and it's for risk assessment. Identifying certain problems, like a risk, supply line shortage or delay. I'm going to make a product. I'm going to be selling it. I hope to sell it at Walmart. And you have to determine, well, what goes into making that product? Well, I've got these 3 elements that go into that product, and they come from Taiwan, Mexico, and Canada. Well, what's the risk? Well, there could be a shortage. There could be a delay. And so you plot that on the matrix, and you say, okay, going across the top, we have the severity of consequence. Going down, we have the frequency of it happening. Well, we've got here, it's a low frequency, but it could happen. And it's a medium as far as the consequence. I'm going to put it in the yellow. I'm going to be aware of it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Well, then we've got another risk, lack of workers with needed skills. Okay, where do we put that? Well, I'm going to put that over here. My wife and I had a very successful business for quite a few years, and we decided to quit over this one. This was the showstopper for us. We couldn't keep good workers for any length of time. And if you can't get skilled workers, that is a risk that, unless you're willing to do the work yourself, you can't bring in people that don't know what they're doing, because that's a whole different risk. And then you've got another risk, competitor growth and innovation. Oh, yeah, I wonder how that works. Well, Apple is dealing with that right now. You know, when Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone, he was the only kid on the block. But now there's Android. Now China's making them. Other nations are starting to make them. And they're even starting to say that the actual iPhone or the cell phone is obsolete. And it's going the way of the dinosaur. And they're saying that because there's so many things that's in that are starting to show up in other areas, why do we need that in our pocket if we've already got all those features in our glasses? You know, in our toaster, in our refrigerator. It's everywhere. And so this is a risk. Where do you put it? Well, it will have some pretty severe consequences, but there's a low frequency. It's only going to happen once or twice. And so now the man in charge of Apple, he has to scramble. How are we going to meet this? Are we going to force this product to continue on into perpetuity? Or are we going to start looking for different things that we can market? Because at one point, if you remember, they were into computers, you know, and then they went into phones, and then for a while they were into watches. Maybe they should consider shoes. You know, they got to make these are decision points. Effective decision making requires resilience and adaptability. And blowing up your experiment and messing up your hair is going to happen all the time. We have a man over here. He's a very, very successful leader, and people respect him, and he's showing how to get through the maze. And he's making decisions. We turn to the left, we turn to the right. And people believe in him. But the fact is, he made a mistake just a little bit ago, and he got himself cornered. A big part of being a successful leader that people are going to respect is when you find that you've made a decision or you're in a bad spot, admit it, and don't keep pressing on. You can't push through the lines. You can't erase them when people aren't looking. You got to say, that's a mistake. We learned something. That's an Elon Musk attitude. And now we move forward. And so therefore, when his rockets blow up, his workers, they can applaud. Well, we learned that. Now what do we do, boss? They respect him. Some good advice. Don't let a win get to your head or a loss to your heart. This is so important because you're going to have wins, you're going to have losses, and you're going to have to deal with them. Sometimes we make good decisions, sometimes we make bad decisions, but we still want the team to listen to us. Effective decision-making, strategic thinking, balancing short-term needs with long-term goals. We've got a set of balances here. I've already got one, a little offset, and you're going to see what happens in just a bit. This is the road to success. This is the project plan. This is your dream. And you're in the car, you're in charge, and you're driving this thing, and you're on schedule, and everything's going good, and you've got a pot of gold waiting for you at the end. You just can't wait to get there. And you know that you're going to be there, tonight before 10 o'clock, and everything's going to work fine, and what could possibly go wrong? Success is in the balance. You feel it, you can smell it, you can taste it. The clock is ticking. The schedule. Money's going, gas. Stop at the restaurant. All of these things. but you're still going to get there. Step on the gas. Go a little faster. Just go a little faster. I can't be late. Schedule is absolutely paramount in this one. And suddenly you've got a heavy weight that is balancing against your success. What could possibly slow me down? What could possibly cause me to miss that schedule? It's a little boy. He's in the car with you. And you're racing toward the pot of gold. And he has a potty on his mind also. You've never experienced this, okay? And so the question has to be asked, which pot is more important now? Which pot is more important now? Okay, this is strategic thinking so that even a mother can understand and a good father can understand. You've got to keep your eye on the goal, but you've got to make a stop. It's just going to happen. You got to make that decision. A culture of continuous learning where leaders and their teams are open to evolving perspectives and solutions. We started out, we were going to make light bulbs. That was the plan. And the light bulb has been perfected over 100 years in production and use around the world. What a simple thing to make, a light bulb. And you're going to make money. You're going to sell them door to door. You've got all sorts of ideas. But there's this rule, never stop learning. Right. Never, never, never stop learning. A culture of continuous learning. Because that light bulb has gone away. And you still want to make light bulbs, or you better learn. I call this embrace the breakthrough. Not only does the light bulb, the incandescent bulb break, you can't even buy them anymore because something else has taken its place. The new era of the light bulb. And what is it you're making? What was your plan? And as you're doing it, are there changes that necessarily have to happen because it's just not going to work? And you couldn't see that when you were planning it. But now that you're halfway there, it's so clear that only a fool would ignore it. But it's going to require a change in scope, a change in cost, a change in schedule. I got to make a decision. I've got to make a choice. What do we do? How do I tell the team? We're not making light bulbs anymore. We're going into the sausage business. Well, I don't know that you want to go that drastic. So now, again, a playbook for project success communication. We've talked about making decisions. Now this is the big, important piece that we have to overlay on all of that. Effective messaging skills. This is so important for a leader as he makes decisions. Communication happens. What does that mean? It means people are going to talk. It means people are going to say things. I've managed projects. I've been involved in a lot of different situations in life. And there are times I wish people would just shut up. Can't we stop them from talking? That person has a mouth. It's like, and the wicked telephone. It's just, communication just happens. And so here you are. You have the truth. You are in charge. You speak words of wisdom and guidance and fact and direction. And all this noise going on around relative to your pet project. Oh, such is life. And so we bring people onto our team. This is the owner, and this is the manager. And so the owner decides, I will communicate to the manager. And the manager will take care of it. And so therefore the manager, with his sharp stick, brings on the workers. These are the ones that do the work. These are the ones that actually accomplish something. The owner, he's got the idea. The manager, he manages the triangle. He manages those aspects. But someone actually has to produce something. Someone's got to do the work. And this is true in every area of life. He talks to them. He talks back to the manager. And that's a good thing. That's communication. It's a loop. I want to talk about this. And it's story time. I have a story. I worked in a business where I was the manager. This is, my wife and I were relatively new in our love relationship, honey. And I would bring her in the evening to help do the work. I had a crew, and we would work long and hard into the night. And there are times I wouldn't get done until 2 a.m. It just wouldn't stop. And it was a print business. I managed a print shop. And we had an owner, I'll call him John, because that was his name. And that was Mel. And the workers, I would tell the workers what to do. And John would get out of his office sometimes, and he would go out onto the floor, and he would begin to give direction, guidance, instruction, critique, criticism, lambasting, anger, and it would totally disrupt my shop. And I would have to go to him gently and say, let's go back in the office and have a talk. And we would sit in the office, and I would explain to him, you hired me to manage this. Either you let me manage this, or I can't manage this at all. I'm in charge. That's my team. I take care of the cost, the schedule, the quality, the workers, the communication. Do not, and am I lying, Sue? Is this the truth? I brought her here as a witness. My job was not only to manage all of that, my job was to manage him. Keep him in his office. Give him a toy to play with. Give him something to keep him occupied while we accomplished his dream. Story time is over. We're still good friends. I haven't worked for that man for over 20 years. We were together during COVID. He was up from California where he's living, and we got together, and they wouldn't let us into a Starbucks, and we stood outside in the rain and talked for hours. Good memories, because we were very successful. Successful because he let me do my job. And so communication happens, and I'm talking about we have to start to control that communication. So I would talk to my people. Now there's other people in the picture also. And I've got this all color-coded, so you don't have problems with that. He can talk to them. Those other people are not workers, but those are people that he can talk to. I don't have a problem with that. We'll explain that later. I didn't necessarily need to talk to them. As a matter of fact, I didn't want to talk to them, but he could talk to them. He would get advice from them, and they would give him advice, and he could do what he wanted with that advice as long as he didn't share it with my workers. Because my workers already had a list of things to do. They didn't need the input from the red people. Now, the red people could communicate up and out. I don't care who they talk to, as long as they leave my team alone. And they would talk to the same person or people that the owner would talk to. So it was an outer loop. I had the inner loop, and the outer loop had to do with the end users, the customers. Now, that's the way it's supposed to work with communicating and decisions. You say, this is a little complicated. Well, this is a little complicated, and it can get a lot worse than that in reality. And so the industry has come up with a matrix to help people live with that, manage through that. And it's called RACI. It's the RACI matrix. Well, what does that mean? Well, I've got it color coordinated. The boss, the owner, he's responsible. Me, the manager, I'm accountable. The support, that's the workers. Okay? They do the work. And then you've got those that you consult, those that give good input. And then you have those that are informed. You tell them things. This is the way to survive a project because communication happens. And you cannot stop communication, but you can manage communication. And this is where a manager or a leader, to be successful, we're talking about decision making and successful communication. I make a decision, but I don't tell anybody. It's not a decision. If I don't tell somebody, it's not a decision. But if I tell the wrong person, it's a disaster. It's just a simple disaster. And so I have to tell the right person, and I have to let the team know this is the rules that we're going to live by. I'm going to tell you something, but you keep your mouth shut. Don't tell anybody. And you know, we see this in the news, we see it in politics. Somebody leaked some information to the news. They had to fire that person. They had to fire them so fast. Somebody has broken the rules of the game. Well, they did it because of their ego. They did it because they don't agree with their boss. They did it because it doesn't matter. They can't do that because now it causes churn. It causes all sorts of discomfort. It causes all sorts of weird analysis to start happening. People are talking. I'm worried. I don't know if I want that product. I don't know if I can trust them. And it goes on and on and on. I don't even like to look at the news because, to be honest with you, it's all fake. It's all fake. I don't like to listen to the noise going on in a business environment. You know, when people go outside and they're having a cigarette outside the office and they're talking, I hope they're talking about fishing. Because if they're talking about the project to somebody that they shouldn't be talking to about the project, they're causing harm. It's like a football team where you've got the quarterback and they've got his plays and he goes into a huddle and he's got paper in front of his face so people can't even see what he's talking about. And somebody sneaks off and goes and talks to the other team. Conceal carry. You can't do that. You know, we ask people when we're interviewing, are you a team player? They say, I'm a team player. Well, what does that mean? Can you follow the rules and keep your mouth shut? Yeah, I guess that's a part of being on a team, isn't it? Okay, and so the project owner, the task owner, the task helper, advice sought, in the loop. Responsible, accountable, support, consulted, informed. That looks so nice. This is a mess. We're taking something that is very complicated and we're making it into something that you can work with. Making a decision. R. The owner makes the decisions. Educating the team, explaining, training, feedback, getting ownership. This is the responsible, and also others are involved in this process. You cannot have a team that has not been clearly given the details of what they're doing. There has to be training, there has to be feedback, and there has to be ownership. I've made a living for most of my life over doing what I'm doing right now, talking. I talk. And if I don't get buy-in and somebody pays me to talk, they paid me for nothing. They paid me for nothing. Because if the people won't buy into it, it's of no value. it's of no value. Stretching towards acceptance. So you've got the 3 reaching towards the 1, trying to get acceptance. R, A, S, reaching for C. Those are the ones that are consulted. They're not in that inner working, but there's some back and forth. They have to be consulted because they know things and they know people. And they're going to have their little loop of communication. Communicating out marketing. The owner talks to the foreman, works with the workers. He talks to the end person. And the perfectly successful process looks like that. That's the perfectly successful process. And they're informed. To make that doable, the industry has come up with what they call a RACI matrix. You've got your different activities, and you got your roles and people. This one over here, Ed, I just put names in. Ed, Tom, Mike, Mary, Jim, Joe, Sam, Mr. Johnson, Tom and the test team, Sue and the super users, Harry and the sales team, on and on and on. These are the activities and the communication. We just call it documents, but it's really the communication. What are you communicating out? I learned a long time ago, I don't communicate anything out that I don't document. If I don't have it written somewhere, I tell somebody something, it's not real. I need to document it. And that can be done in an email thread that is saved. It can be done in some sort of a training device. But it has to be something that you can go back to and say, we talked about this. You agreed to this. You signed this. You signed up for this. And then as you start to fill in this matrix, all these different tasks, all these different documents, all these different means of communication, they say, yep, I'm responsible. I'm accountable. Yes, I will do the work. And once they see that this is how it's going to be done, magic. It works. And you communicate decisions as things change. Because things will change. And they'll respect you for it. You say, look, this is where we were. But now this is what's happened. This is what we've learned. We're going to have to make some adjustments. It's going to affect the budget, but we're going to stay on schedule. And quality is not going to suffer. That's communication. And I'm pretty well done here. Decision-making and successful team leadership. Understands the systems, communicates a compelling vision throughout the process, while able to make tough decisions. Any comments, questions?
So this would be a step beyond